Okay, hi everyone. This is for demo number 2, and this is for decorating your cake based on your first cake assignment. So we're going to be going over how to get a really nice smooth finish on the side of your cake and also to fill in your top. This is the cake from yesterday's demo, and then once we do that, we're going to go put this in the fridge for a little while. I'm going to go over how to smooth your sides with your handy dandy bench scraper. And from there, I'm going to go over working on some decorator buttercream flowers and placing those on your cake, or different ways that you can place a border on your cake and on top. Okay, so let's get started. So as I was messing around with this actually popped up, which is fine. If it doesn't pop up that easily, what you can do is you can just take a spatula and just slice it underneath your cardboard, and it should pop up fairly well. Okay, so normally you would have like some sort of well, and that's fine. I was going to fill that in, but in this case, if you don't have a well, and you can also look at the buttercream demo that I have already just for doing a buttercream cake. Alright, so, and just remember to take off your parchment paper. You don't want to leave it on and then try to cut into it and then find, oh, you accidentally left it on there. So, what I'm going to do is, instead of filling it in, I'm going to start using my bench scraper to... Sorry about that. So what I'm doing is I want to flatten my top. It's actually a little bit kind of domed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to take my bench scraper, and because it has a very fine edge to it, it's really good for scraping. So I'm going to just try to flatten this out a bit before I add any sort of buttercream to it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got some parts here that are a little bit rough, and I'm just going to just go around, and I don't really want a lot, and this should be enough. And then I'm just going to go around some areas here. Some kind of little divots and dents and things like that. Okay. And then I'm just going to take my spatula and just kind of smooth those little spaces in, kind of forcing some buttercream into those little holes. And while you're actually putting on your buttercream, you're going to find that it's going to start getting really stiff. It's just because your cake is really cold. This has actually been in the freezer overnight. So then I'm going to take this bench scraper and make sure that you are flat against your turntable. And then I'm just going to go around and a little by little and I'm just scraping that away. Just be aware that we tend to turn our heads like this, and then when we tend to turn our heads, we also tend to turn our bench scraper. So you really want to make sure that it is actually flat against your turntable. If not, you're probably going to find that you're going to get kind of a dome shape. I'm just going to go all the way around, just very slowly. And you can hear, hopefully you can hear my bench scraper against the surface. So it is still a bit rough. So I'm just going to go over just a little tiny bit more. Now, as you've noticed, these kind of like, I would call them like bevels maybe, I don't know. It's because of the bottom board, it's the cardboard. Some students have been really upset over this, that, you know, they can't get rid of it, things like that. I just say, just don't worry about it. People really aren't going to notice. And once you have your cake decorated, it's not really going to matter much. They're going to notice your decoration rather than like the bevels and things like that. So, so I would just not worry about that. Try to make it as smooth as possible. So then I'm going to go on the top. And just like yesterday, I'm going to kind of smooth this out. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking my arm and resting it against my side. And I want to add a little bit more on the top because it kind of has this area that really nothing is happening with it. So I'm gonna just go back, and so once again I have my spatula flat against the cake, the surface, and I have it tipped up facing the ceiling. Okay. All right, so now we have this bridge, or hangover, I guess you'd say. And I'm just gonna go over and just I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm gonna put it in the fridge, and from there, I'm gonna maybe just tidy up the top a little bit, the sides. Oops, be careful, a little bit slippery. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna go over working on some buttercream roses. And I'll show you some great things that I do. Alternatives that I use with my nail. Okay, so you have a recipe for decorator icing, and a great way to get around making, like, say, piping like a mound of buttercream and then building your flower on it is to kind of make a paste with some of your decorator icing. And what I do is it's basically just your decorator icing with tons and tons of powdered sugar in it, to the point where it's actually, you can mold it, okay? And so what I do is I have pieces of parchment paper, and you can just take some of the parchment paper you were given, cut it up in squares. And I'm going to just pipe a little bit on here for this square of parchment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mound here, and I'm going to just make a cone. And I'm going to build my rose. Now I'm using a 104, that's a basic petal tip, so you'll probably have a 102 and a 104 in your kit. And also you're going to have couplers, and we'll go over the use of couplers as well. They're very, very handy. So what I'm doing is I'm just making just kind of a cabbage rose. And I'm just going to go over the middle, and I'm just going in arcs. And every time I go into an arc, I cover 2 other arcs. And then as I go a little bit farther down. So as I'm going, it's a little bit farther down. Okay, and then so because I had built my mound so big, I have a really nice high rose. If you're not too sure about using your nail, what you can do is also use your turntable. Do the same thing on your turntable, and as you move, you would move your turntable. Okay. So then I have that here, and I'm just going to set this here. And the reason why we put these on little parchment paper pieces instead of just on a nail, as you would see a lot of times they put it on a nail and then they have like a little buttercream scissors and take it and put it on your cake or whatever, is because I like to put these in the refrigerator overnight or for at least a couple of hours. And that way they're easy to peel off and place on the cake. And I will show you how to do that as well. Okay, so I have some different colors here, and I made some little succulents as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And you can do little succulents if you want. If you don't want to do flowers, that's fine too. We're going to still go over great ways that you could decorate your cake without having to make buttercream flowers. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of holding the piping bag and squeezing and then just lifting up. Just at different lengths. Okay, so you've got a little cluster of a succulent. And then I'm just going to add just some little yellow dots. Just for color. Okay, so we have that. And then I'm going to make a kind of a dark turquoise blossom, and this is with a 102. So you can make blossoms with petal, the different petal tips as well. And then I'm just going to push and release and swipe away and release. So there you've got a little blossom there. Okay. And the great thing about having a coupler is that what you can do is I've got this here, and right now I have a 102 petal tip, and I actually want to use this for my border. So what I'm going to do is, because you have a coupler, you can change out your tips very easily. So if you want to use one color with several different tips, you can, and a coupler makes that easy. If you were just to put your tip in the bag, it would be stuck in the bag. You'd have to actually cut it, squirt it out into another bag, and then pull out the rest of the bag over your tip. So, and that's a lot more work, I think, than just putting a coupler in and switching them out. So, we have some of our flowers here. So, what I like to do before I even start piping on my cake, and this goes for using royal icing, anything like that, any sort of piping on your cake or decorative piping, is I practice, and I usually suggest this to my students. I have them practice on the side, either on a big piece of parchment, or when you're at home, you can use a cutting board, you can use a plate, anything that you can scrape it off and then practice more. So I'm just going to practice doing some shells. Before I even put them on my cake. Okay. This just kind of warms up your hand. And also another tip is everybody tends to overfill their bags, and I do the same thing. It's almost kind of like you don't mean to do it, but you end up doing it anyway, and then you realize, oh, there's just way too much in your bag. So what happens is it kind of puts a lot of stress on your hands and a lot of pressure on the bag. And sometimes it can actually pop out it could actually like maybe force it out on the sides or something like that. So you don't want to overfill the bag. You want to have a certain amount where it feels nice in your palm of your hand. And also, I see people like this, and you're not going to have a lot of control over it if you're like this. So what you can do is to have better control is to hold your bag between your thumb and your pointer finger, or index finger as they call it. Okay, so just like this, and then your three, so like this, and then your three other fingers are used to squeeze your hand, or to squeeze your bag, okay? And as you're piping, so what I do is I hold my hand to steady my one hand. Okay, so I'm holding it like this. That will help your hand steady and not shake. If you're just like this, I'm actually shaking right now as well. Okay, when I hold my hand like this, it doesn't shake. Okay, so that's a really good way to steady your hands. Okay, so I'm going to change out some of my tips, and I'm going to change this out for a leaf tip, which is a number 68. You should have a number 68 in your kit. And we're going to also go over using different star tips for decorating. Okay, decorating, and then also not just star tips, but using a straight tip. So you should have like a 1 or a 2, but then there's also larger ones if you have it, and this is a number 8. And it's just a plain circle. All right, so I'm gonna get the cake. Make sure that I place my turntable here and not drop the cake at the same time. You don't want to do that. I certainly don't want to do it. Okay, so before we get started, you also had gotten some cake drums. This is a cake drum. It's scalloped, and it has like a decorative design on it. And then, like I said yesterday, you need something so that it doesn't move around. So you could also use a wet paper towel, something like that, or even like a wet cloth. That would work too. And then you're gonna place your drum on your turntable. And then I'm just going to put some buttercream here. So that the cake does not move around. And then to place your cake on a drum or a flat surface, you're going to hold it with your flat hand. Put your offset underneath. And so it's holding, I have an offset holding it and my hand. You're going to drop that. And so now the offset is underneath. And this way you can adjust whether it's centered on your board. And then I'm just going to hold a little bit, and there you have it. It takes a little practice. It really does. So if you're feeling a little wobbly, don't worry, it's very normal. It happens to me sometimes too, especially the bigger the cake. So, okay, so I'm going to just start taking my bench scraper and if your cake wants to slide around like it wants to with me, just hold it to one side with the flat of your hand, and that helps a lot. So what I'm doing also now is I want to make sure that one side is not higher than the other, and that can happen. As of right now, this side is a little bit higher, and so I'm just going to shave that off a bit. And you notice my middle is kind of like bowed, so I'm kind of focusing on the middle. Okay. So let's see. Oh, it's centered. So this thing here, this little handy dandy thing is called a level. And it's really nice to see if your cake stands are level, like your turning table is level. Sometimes they're not. Also the top of your cake. It really helps if you're building a cake and at each time you add a tier onto the next, you would add a level just to see where you're at and then make adjustments. So you can get these for $1, $1. At Walmart, $1.50, or at Menards, anything like that. Harbor Freight, they have them there. Okay, so I noticed I've got some little divots in there. I'm just going to take some buttercream, fill those in really quick. And just lightly smooth that out. So I do have a little bit of roughness here. If this is really bugging you, what you can do is just do the same thing that you did with the top, is you just fill some areas. So let's say oh, you know, it's bugging me and It's just bugging me. So let's just fill that in. And let's just get it really smooth. Okay. And then I'm just gonna go, I just wanna see what that needs to be filled in too. You can also use your speed tip to go around. It is a bit faster. I just didn't fill it up and just didn't take the time to do it. So I'm gonna go around and just make sure that your bench scraper is flat against the surface. And I notice that I am getting much more of a smoothness to my cake, which is really, really, really satisfying. It's very satisfying. Okay, so if you start getting something like this, it's just because you haven't wiped down your bench scraper between times that you swipe. So just make sure to clean your bench scraper because you're just gonna end up putting excess back on there. So, all right, so here we have it. I'm happy with it. I think it looks fantastic. Okay, so let's go with a first things that you can do to decorate without using to make buttercream flowers if you're not too confident about doing that. Okay, is you can start by doing some really fun things like making rosettes. And if you're going to make rosettes, what I would do is I would practice on a board first. Okay. So before you even do that on your cake, is just make little rosettes. Okay, before you do that, one thing I do want to stress is that a lot of times some people, they want to do stars because they think it's pretty easy to do stars, but however, stars can be very tricky. And the thing is that when you're doing your border, what I'm looking for when I grade is consistency of your border. And stars tend to not be very consistent, just because it takes a little bit of squeezing and then you have to stop and then up. A lot of times you get like tails and things like that. So think twice, or at least practice with stars before you put it on your cake, because they may seem easier, but they're not necessarily that easy. So, so let's get started with some rosettes. So I'm going to put some rosettes along the edge. And I'm just looking for a border along the edge here. But you can kind of have fun with it and make a few different types of rosettes. So I'm just I'm doing it kind of like I have like the mustard green in between here, and then I might do kind of like a fun little pattern. Okay, something like this with different colors. So that could be your border, and you could also take it on the side as well. Okay, so now your bottom, for your border, it needs to cover your board, this board right on the bottom. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a rosette on the border, or where your board and your cake drum meet. And I just want to make sure that it covers that board. So maybe I bring it up, you know, all the way to the top, or not to the top, but farther up as a little design. Okay, so that is one way that you can decorate your cake. Okay. Another way that we're going to go over is actually working with buttercream flowers. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the buttercream flowers that I had made last night. I'm going to grab those. Be right back. Okay, so I've got, I don't know if you can see it, but I have all these that were made last night. Okay, and my buttercream is not as firm as I thought. I really didn't follow a recipe. I just kind of threw it together just because of time. So your recipe that you have is much better. One thing I do want to add, if your hands are really warm and say your buttercream is just oozing out, your decorator buttercream is oozing out, it's not stiff, you're not getting any stability or anything, just add a little bit more powdered sugar. And you want it to be kind of like your whole, see how like I'm just touching that? And it literally, it's kind of almost a little bit like paste. It's going to crust over because it is made with powdered sugar. So, and powdered sugar tends to dry things out. But, so you want it like that. You don't necessarily want it oozy. But like I said, if you have warm hands, I don't really have a problem with that. My hands are mostly always cold all the time. But you just add a little bit more powdered sugar, and you should be okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building my little garden here. And what I'm doing is I'm just adding some Swiss to build it up so that they're not all kind of squished together, and I have some height. Okay, so I'm gonna start with, let's see, I kind of want them closer together. I'm gonna just start with like the bigger blossoms. Okay, so I have this here, and I'm just gonna place it on top. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. I'll start decorating on this side so you can see better. And then I think I'm going to put another color on there. Okay. And like I said, they're not wanting to cooperate very well with me just because they're not really set up very well as I thought they would be. So I'm just gonna place that right here. And let's see, let's place this little guy over here. Let's get on under here. Okay, trying not to make a mess. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll start adding my little succulents. There we go. So that's really cute. I think that's really cute. So we got that, and then I think I'm going to add one right there. Whoop. Try not to be too clumsy here. And this guy is kind of falling apart on me. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh no. That's okay. We can fix it. I don't think he was staying together anyway. I'm gonna put one right there. It kind of fell apart. That's okay. And I've got a few of them that kind of just look like little blobs together, because really when you think about it, that's really what succulents kind of look like. Okay. And then I'm going to put I'm going to put a little bud there. And I'm going to salvage this here. This succulent that fell apart. It's okay. And then I've got these little really vibrant type of blossoms, and I'm just going to place that there. So I start with the large blossoms, and then I kind of just add smaller stuff as I'm going along. Okay, get over there. Let's put another one here. If it wants to cooperate, okay. Just stuck one in there. Okay. So there we have it. So then I've got this mound and I want to start adding some leaves to it, just to fill in space. So even when you're working with gum paste, leaves and blossoms really are perfect for just hiding things or filling in space, kind of like dead space that needs something there. So when you're working with a leaf tip, which is I have a 68 here, you're going to be actually squeezing from where, not the flat side where it's flat, I don't know if you can see, but you're going to be squeezing from the actual side. Actually, you're going to be squeezing from the flat side. So, excuse what I just said, you're going to squeeze from the flat side. Okay. So, this is my little garden that I got going on. I'm just adding stuff to it. And then, so I know that I've said, oh, you know, I want a border on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this mustard color and I'm going to take this straight tip, which is a number 8. And I'm just going to go and just make kind of like these little ropes around. And I would normally take it just all the way around the top of the cake if this wasn't there. And maybe you could put like some roses here to kind of, or maybe along the rope or something like that. That's another way that you could do kind of a top border. Okay, and then for the bottom, I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to do a shell. Okay, so I have a nice shell on the bottom, and what I normally do is I try to incorporate a color on the bottom to where you would have something on the top. So, so these are several ways that you could decorate. You can also do something like a watercolor design where you would have your offset, and then you just color a little bit of your Swiss buttercream with certain colors like pink or, you know, purple, whatever you want, and just kind of dab, and then take your scraper and just go along, and then you have like this nice watercolor effect. And then you could add, you know, like little swirls, or if you want to still do stars, it's fine on the top, just to kind of bring in those colors with your watercolor design. So there's definitely more things that you can do than maybe someone would think. So look on your assignment page for the first project, and in the back of it there are pictures of different designs, so that can give you an idea of what you can do. Like I said, what I'm looking for is straight sides, nice and smooth, a flat top, and just consistency with your piping. I'm not too concerned about the flowers because we really don't go over buttercream flowers that much. It's more based on gum paste flowers. I'm more interested in your piping skills as with shells and rosettes, because really that's what you're going to be doing a lot of, more than you would think, is shells, reverse shells, and rosettes. When you get in production, you're going to be doing a lot of rosettes, just because they top every piece of dessert that goes into the banquets with rosettes. So you're going to get really good at it. And those are the things I'm looking for, is in consistency. So before you put it on your cake, just remember to practice on any sort of board. Even if you have like a sheet cake board that you can get at Walmart and it's got kind of a slick top, you just scrape it off, put it back in your bag, repipe it, scrape it off. It's super easy. It's a great way to practice. Or something like this, I can just scrape this off, put it back in the bag, and start all over again. So if you have any questions, just put them below, and I will answer them as best as I can, or you can email me, and I will answer them as well. And then I will let you know when the next YouTube live video is, and what we'll be covering. Most likely it will be on working with gum paste and the flowers that you'll be making for class. All right, well, thank you for tuning in, if you've tuned in, or if you decide to tune in later. So thanks, bye.